G'day everyone, this is DJ Cotts here, and today we'll be checking out this guy, the Pioneer XDJ-R1 DJ system. Now the reason I call it a DJ system instead of a controller is because it's not just a controller. It can be used as a standalone unit to play CDs, record box formatted USB keys, or it can be used as a controller with a laptop as well. So you can pick this up, take it somewhere, put it down and use it without any external peripherals required. It includes remote box functionality, which basically allows you to control the entire unit from an iPad, iPhone or iPod Touch. We'll be exploring that further. It's one of the only controllers at the time of recording this video that supports it, and it opens up some interesting possibilities. At the time of recording this, it's about $1,000 from Store DJ here in Australia. It includes a huge amount of functionality which we'll be exploring during this video. And I've been lucky enough to be using this guy for about 5 months now, so I know it very, very well. I've been using it at home and out. So I'm basically doing this video to let you guys know whether it's worth checking out. So I hope you enjoy. And one thing I'm going to really be covering in this video is stability. There's been a lot of people which have, when this first got released, which were basically holding off on purchasing it or weren't happy with it because of reliability issues. Be covering that further. Click this button here if you want to skip straight to my thoughts on that. But if not, sit back, relax, enjoy. Hey! Alright, so once you unbox the XDJ-R1, you get the following: a user manual, a wireless setup guide, you get a USB cable for connection to a laptop so you can use this as a controller, and you also get a copy of Record Box. Now this also includes a serial for virtual DJ LE as well, so you can use it straight off the bat. But the most important thing is the XDJ-R1 unit itself. As you can see, it's an all-in-one controller. We've got a mixer section here, 2 CDJ sections over here, and also there's some effect sections here, and the inclusion of color effects, which is my favorite type of effect, I must say, just over here, and they're channel independent as well. Also, the unit here, let's have a look at the connectivity options. Whoa, we don't want to drop it. We have the XLR outs here. We've got a master out, a booth out, a microphone connection. That's 5¼ We've got an auxiliary in and a phono and line in, and I'll explain what these are used for in a second. We've also got a ground terminal for connection of turntables, another line in, USB connection for the controller, and also your power. Now on the front we have the CD trays for putting in CDs, and we've also got 2 headphone jacks. Now this is really useful if you want to teach someone else how to DJ, or you're playing back-to-back sets and you want 2 headphones plugged in, so that's kind of cool. One's a 3¼ one's a 5¼ full-sized headphone jack, and there's nothing on the bottom. But the main thing we want to concentrate is the top, so let's plug it in.
I need you more.
So the first thing you want to do when you get any of this gear is update the firmware. That goes for all DJ gear, including this XDJ-R1. Now on the R1, if you want to check what version you're running, you hold the utility button there, and you basically scroll until you see the version. We can see here that we're running version 1.08. As of filming this, 1.09 is out, so we're going to update the unit now. The way you do that is basically turn the unit off, go to the Pioneer website, download the latest firmware and put it on a USB key, and we put the USB key in. And what we do is, before we turn on the unit, we hold the USB button and the shift button there, and then we turn the unit on, and then we wait for it to detect the firmware. It should read the USB key and display download, and what it's doing now is it's downloading the new firmware from the key onto the unit, and then it should reboot and update. Version 1.09, success! So now that we've updated this unit, let's take a better look at this system. As you've already noticed, it's a fairly standard layout and it follows the form of Pioneer's club standard gear. In the middle you have a 2-channel mixer with 3 band EQs. We've got gain controls up the top here and color effects here. There's 4 color effects to choose from. We've got noise, pitch, and the ones that I use a lot, which are crush and filter. They're channel independent as well, so you can use the filter to help you get out of some dodgy mixes if you ever get stuck in that situation. It's kind of cool. And I mentioned earlier the presence of the auxiliary and phono in plugs on the back of the unit. Now this unit is pretty versatile, and that's one thing that I really like about it. You don't actually have to use the players that are seen here. You can connect external audio sources using the phono and auxiliary ins on the back and use this mixer just as a mixer. You basically choose the input selectors over here and just use the mixer as basically a standalone unit. So that's pretty cool. On the left hand side and the right hand side here, we've got the player sections though. On the top left of the player, we've got the import source selection. We've got USB for record box formatted keys, CDs for CDs, and MIDI for using the unit as a controller with software such as Virtual DJ, Tractor, or Serato. We have the Beat FX section here for beat timed effects. We've got 4 to choose from: transform, flanger, echo, and roll. And we've got the tempo slider located on the right hand side of the player here, just like you'd find on a CDJ. And it's worth noting that the range of this tempo slider can only be set to 16% as a maximum. On many CDJs you can choose 50 or even 100%. However, that only causes a problem for certain DJs that really want to change genres or really change crazy tempos. Most people don't run into a problem with it. We have hot cues down the bottom here, or when you press the mode button, it switches between these buttons being for hot cues or for a 4-beat sampler. Basically, the 4-beat sampler, what it lets you do is record 4 beats of audio into one of these banks and call it back whenever you want. So you could be basically playing some rap tunes, capture 4 beats of this rap song and just call back that lyric or vocal whenever you want. Makes for some kind of cool fun, and you can do some juggling and things like that. So that's a really cool feature about this unit. But as this XDJ-R1 is record box compatible, of course, we have the Pioneer Sync feature down here on each side of the player to use however you wish. So this controller, as I mentioned, can now be used as is, no external things required. You can browse tracks using the interface located on the unit, and it's really a similar experience to using the Pioneer CDJ-400s. On the screen you get a BPM readout, a tempo and time remaining readout, with a 1-line or 2-line text display. There's no waveforms located on this controller at the moment, even simple waveforms. Browsing the unit itself in using this interface can be a little bit clunky at the best of times, but it really does work well when using standard CDs because you can use the track search back and forward here. You can get around on it and it works fine for its purpose. But once you've used the interface that I'm about to show you, you won't actually want to go back to using this method of browsing USB keys. And that's using Remote Box with an iPhone or an iPad device. I forgot to mention earlier, but this unit actually comes with something else in the box, and it's this bracket here. This is actually an iPhone bracket that clips onto the back of the unit. It just sits in like that, and basically we can then put control surfaces down. I have an iPad here, and I am going to put it down here. As you may notice, the first thing is this is for an iPhone, not an iPad. So if I'm using this to control the unit, it falls off. So my solution that I found to that is Mr. Sticky Tape here. So we just get some duct tape there, put that over. Yeah, packing tape rocks. And try not to put packing tape over the touchscreen. That doesn't do wonders. Hang on, we'll clip it in. Sweet. And now it actually stays on the unit. A lot of people were saying with one of the mixes I did to this, hey, your iPad looks really unstable. That's the reason why. One thing I would suggest if you're using this as a long-term solution is to get an external stand. If you're using an iPad, that is, iPhone it's fine, such as this one. And then you can basically just sit it on the stand there. And now it's actually a stable iPad. But let's get to the remote box interface and connect this unit up to the iPad. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at RemoteBox. RemoteBox is the application that you can download from the Apple App Store for Apple devices, which integrates with the XDJ-R1. There's no Android version out yet, and you can use it for the iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch devices. When you first load it up on the iPad, you can see that there's a representation of the unit's layout on the screen here, and you can touch each individual section to get access to the controls that are on the unit. So if we tap Mixer, we can see that these controls come up, which represent the controls on the mixer. If we move the crossfader on the mixer on the actual unit, we can see it move in the RemoteBox application. Or we can actually mix just using the iPad, so we can actually control that by putting our finger on the iPad and moving the controls. And I'll talk a bit more about takeover mode in a second once we turn the lights on. Up here we've got basically different tabs, and we can access different controls. We've got Deck 1 up in the right hand corner, which gives us access to all of Deck 1's controls, as you would expect. We've got an auto beat loop section here for looping. We've got the hot cue and the sampler, the 3 buttons down here, and a cue and play button for the Deck 1 of the unit. It's actually pretty responsive, as you would expect, and it works really well. We've got a mixer section in the middle here for basic mixing functions, and also Deck 2 on the iPad version on the right. Now we can do a whole DJ mix with this iPad and walk away from the unit. As long as you stay within Wi-Fi range, you can still mix. I don't know when that would be particularly useful, unless you want a bathroom break and you're a DJ or something and you want to take this with you and keep the party going. I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's basically the deck section. Now we've got the FX sections for both decks, and this is probably the coolest thing about the XDJ-R1. It gives you an XY pad here, and you can select one or more effects on the mixer, and they're pretty standard effects that were present on the DJM-800 and DJM-900, but you can combine them and do some interesting things that you can't do on any other controller. You can't do this on any other Pioneer gear. You can do it with things like the Korg Chaos Pad and things like that, but basically it allows you to control these effects in XY space and do some pretty funky stuff with them. I really like it, and I'll get to that in a second. The coolest thing about this though, as I mentioned, the browsing was a little bit clunky on the unit before. This is browsing using the RemoteBox application much better. You can select artist, album, track, or your RecordBox playlists here on the left. Select a playlist, browse through it very easily. If I want to load a track, I basically pick a track and press load 1 or load 2 to load it on whichever deck that I want. So I want to load that track onto the deck 1. I want to load this track onto deck 2, and now the tracks are actually loaded. We can also search for tracks at the top here using the search function. So I want to search for a Jackazid tune because Jackazid is awesome. We found it, and then we've loaded that track into the deck. So it's quite quick to browse through your collection and find tunes, much faster than using the actual unit itself, and it adds a lot to this deck. And that's pretty much the layout of RemoteBox, and we'll turn the lights on and talk about things like takeover mode. So one of the things that people tend to get really frustrated with these controllers is something called takeover mode. It's something that frustrated me when I first started using the controller until I really understood what it was doing. Basically, as I mentioned before, you have a representation of the controls on the mixer here. If I move this crossfader down, you can see that it moves down in the RemoteBox application as well. But then you run into a situation. What happens if I move the fader down on the iPad, but the fader is still up on the controller? Now, this is what I mean by takeover mode. Basically, the iPad has now taken control of the mixer. This fader does nothing anymore. So this track is silent until we move the fader to the position that it is on the iPad. So it doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything. And then when we get to the bottom and move it back up again, Now they're back in sync, and now we can use the controller to mix again. Now, the reason they've done this is to kind of avoid the situation where if you moved the fader all the way down on the iPad and you suddenly moved the fader a little bit down on here, it stops the volume jumping completely up and then going down a little bit, which could really screw up your mix. So that's something to keep in mind when you're interchanging between the iPad and the controller, just to make sure that you understand how takeover mode works, and it will avoid some frustrations there. It used to be a little bit buggy on earlier firmware versions where the controls wouldn't pick up properly, and I had a bit of trouble with it. They've ironed out most of those bugs now that I can find. I have no issues with it anymore. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So how hard is it to mix just using Remote Box, I hear you ask? Alright, so there's a number of common questions that friends and other DJs I know have asked me about this unit, and I thought I would answer these based on my opinion. One of the first questions was, how do they handle normal CDs? So we've put the CDs in the players, and basically we've got the CD mode selected here. And the first thing you will notice when they load CDs is there will be no BPM reading on the actual tracks. Now, I've popped the CD in before, so it's had a chance to analyze a couple of tracks. But if we'll switch to a track that it hasn't analysed yet, so just track 3 on this CD, you can see that there's no BPM reading there. Everything works as normal though if you need to mix with these tracks straight away. It's very responsive, we can flick to another track. Very quick, and you can use the colour effects. And it does take a little while until the BPM actually gets analysed, and it's now displayed there, as you can see. Once it's displayed, we can then use the beat FX section reliably. You can use it before the BPM's analysed to the track, but it's really not a good idea. The effects will be all out of time. So we can now use them. You get the idea. And yeah, but CDs seem to work fine. Tracks fairly responsive to load, so if we want to load track 9, you can play with it straight away. Let's go to track 10 on this CD. Loading, loading, come on, come on, come on. Now searching through the tracks. Does a fairly good job. Sometimes it can be a little bit laggy when you're actually moving forward and backwards through the track in this manner fairly quickly, but that's the problem with the USBs and the CDs on this particular unit. Sometimes it's a little bit slow. If you want to seek the track, you really need to use the iPad here. You can actually drag this bar and move it later in the track. And then that's how you actually seek around the track. There's no way to fast forward or rewind the tracks using controls just on this unit. So it'll automatically queue up the track and do everything for you, so it's not a problem for most people. The next one is charging an iPhone or an iPad. You can charge an iPhone, but you can't charge an iPad. The iPads require a 2 amp USB connector. On this unit, there's only a 500 milliamp USB connector, and you probably don't want anything plugged into the unit there anyway, because chances are that spot is going to be free with your record box or USB key. So you just need to make sure that you bring a charger along if you are using an external control surface. Also, that being said, you cannot play music that is stored on these devices. This is a control surface only. When you browse the music, this music is not contained on this device, it's contained on the USB key that's here. There's no way to play tracks that are on the iPad or iPhone. You have to have a record box USB key or CDs in the unit. This is just a control surface, as I said before. And apart from that, I nearly forgot stability of this unit. A lot of people, when they first got this unit, actually complained a lot. They said, I'm going to return this unit to Pioneer, I'm not happy with it, it's not stable enough. I got this when it first came out, and there were a few little glitchy issues. It was mainly to do with the control of this iPad between the unit and this. I must say though, now that we're at version 1.09, we're about, I think, 6 months after this controller got released, just about all the bugs have been sorted out. I've only ever had one problem, and that was this happened.
It's not. It crashed. The player. I can't, it's broken.
That happened when I was recording my last YouTube mix, and yep, the unit crashed, as you probably saw then. That was using version 1.06 of this controller. We're now using version 1.09. That crash that I had is the only one that I've had when using this unit. I've probably had about 48 hours of DJing in total with this, so it's not very common, and I'm pretty sure that the bugs have been sorted out right now, but obviously it could happen again. I have actually DJ'd out at gigs with this controller, and it's survived during then, so it's pretty good. One of the problems with the old XDJ-R1 firmware were loops drifting on the unit, so let's see if that's been fixed in version 1.09. So what I've done is I've just put it into a 1-beat loop. We're going to see if it stays in time with this reference track here. So it's something they fixed up in the later versions. What previously happened was basically you would enter a beat loop and then it might not stick to one beat properly, and it might drift around the place and suddenly change timings, but I haven't experienced that issue ever since, so that seems to be all fixed up. One bug that they've also previously fixed up from older firmware is the platter scratching. So what used to happen is when you move the platter back and forth to scratch a sample, it would actually drift, and basically the movement of the platter wouldn't represent the position of the track accurately. I find that it sometimes drifts, but it's pretty accurate now, and I'll just demonstrate that by basically scratching back and forth a beat. I know that's really annoying, but it demonstrates that it's actually staying on beat. One thing I'll quickly show you is the 4-beat sampler down here. It lets you record a 4-beat loop from any tracks into these sample banks here. So for example, I can catch this vocal part, or I could miss it. Now, when I've pressed that button and held it down, it's actually recorded that loop. And I can just call that up whenever now. Once these 4-beat samples have been recorded into the unit, they will stay in that unit. Even if I change to another track, or even if I turn the unit off, take the USB media out and replace it with CDs or other USB media, these recorded samples will stay in the unit. They will also automatically quantize to the timing of your track. So if we're playing in a completely different genre, or let's slow down everything to 157 beats per minute, this will actually slow down and speed up according to the music, so it will always stay in time when you do drop that sample. Had to use that tempo slider because that was the master, and sync was turned on, so. So let's take a quick look at the Pioneer XDJ-R1 as a MIDI controller. Now, I use Platter Scratch, and there aren't any official mappings from Native Instruments out yet for the Pioneer XDJ-R1, as far as I know. And basically what I've done is I've gone to DJ Tech Tools. They've got a MIDI map section there for most controllers, so if you're ever searching for a mapping for Traktor or Serato for any of your controllers, definitely head over to djtechtools.com and check it out. I've downloaded one mapping here and I'm having quite a bit of trouble with it. I've been working at this for about half an hour now, trying to get it working, but basically the features that are working on the controller at the moment are the CDJs. I can hit play, pause, cue tracks. I can browse using the controller, my file library here, and basically load tracks into each deck. That works fine. So at the moment I can't get a few things to work, like the mixer here isn't working, the basic functions work. So basically for Traktor I think it's a no-go at the moment until someone comes up with a better mapping. I could sit down and create a mapping and the controller is perfectly capable of working with it, but it takes someone to actually sit down, figure out all the MIDI messages that are being sent from this thing and basically plug them into Traktor. Anyone can do it, but it takes a lot of time to get right. So really we're at the mercy of Native Instruments or Rain, or Rain makes Serato? No, Serato makes Serato. Rain make hardware. Anyway, for Serato to come up with a good mapping. So let me know if Serato works, by the way, if you've got this controller. I will link to the Traktor mapping that is best at the moment, so if you guys find any other Traktor mappings out there or you know of any, let me know. I'll put them in the description box below. But as I said at the start of the video, this does come with Virtual DJ, so there is a Pioneer official mapping for Virtual DJ out there that should work perfectly with the software. So really that brings me to my final thoughts for the Pioneer XDJ-R1 DJ system. Overall, I think it is absolutely awesome. As we just demonstrated, probably not as a DJ controller. There's many other controllers out there from Pioneer which do a better job and have officially supported mappings for the purpose. However, if you want a standalone DJ system that you can pick up and take with you, you won't forget any cables because this really just needs power and audio plugged in, and you have an iPhone or an iPad to use the remote box software, this thing is really the kind of killer DJ setup if you don't have one already. Emulates club standard gear, it's pretty responsive, a lot of the firmware issues have been sorted out, so it shouldn't crash on you. I won't say that it never will because it happened to me once on an older firmware, but I'm pretty sure that that has all been sorted out, but there's new firmware coming out all the time, so Pioneer are supporting this for a long time to come. But yeah, really solid build quality compared to the other DJ controllers or units that I have seen. It feels like a really solid and well-built unit. It's quite heavy, but that's a good thing. And yeah, as I said, buttons are solid. It's got an independent mixer, so you can plug in vinyl turntables if you want to and use it. My favorite thing about the unit is it's got the color effects and that XY pad for the effects as well. Now the reason I didn't do a mix during this review is because I've done a lot of other mixes on YouTube with this controller. So if you want to see it in action, check out these videos here. And yeah, I hope that provided you some insight. As I said, I think at $1,000, this controller kind of creates a couple of problems in a way for Pioneer. I can't see how people could justify buying a lot of the expensive gear because I actually think that this guy is so good. Unless you need the full-size platters, yeah, not much more to say really. So as always, I hope that was helpful, and yeah, I'll catch you next time. Part 1!